Welcome and thank you so much for joining the panel. So as a short introduction, I'm Indy, and over the past few months, I've been leading the language and culture work stream, which has opened up a space to really listen, learn, and understand the needs of local organizers within the context of language and culture. So as part of that work, so much has come out of that. And I've been really grateful to have the opportunity to be part of that space and to really understand what change looks like for local organizers when it comes to those particular needs. And this is how this panel has come about, creating a space to be able to talk about this in more detail, specifically within the context also of local organizers based within the global majority world, a so-called global south. And so this particular panel is looking at exploring how culture is important in informing how resources, support systems, spaces are designed in terms of incorporating the needs of local organizers going forward, and really understanding the nuances attached to the different communities and cultures as well that many of the local organizers are working within. So without further ado, it would be great to introduce our three amazing panelists. And if it's okay, I'd just like to invite Eva, if it's okay, to share a short introduction about yourself.
Yes, thank you very much, Indy. And also, I'm very happy to be here, that you invited us, not only because of myself, but also as part of Tricolor Coalition of a group of 30 volunteers plus more or less 150 members that have joined this group that is interested to see in which ways we can promote sustainability, defining sustainability as a safe and just space in humanity. So I'm now a co-founder of Tricolor Coalition, which is Doughnut Economics Mexico City Open Network. And we have been doing different types of work on this that I will be very happy to continue sharing later on. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Thanks so much for joining us as well. Sujay, could I please pass it over to you?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to this panel. So I'm Sujay, and I work as the research manager at the Bioregional Center of Excellence here in the Jagriti Enterprise Center, which is a rural incubator where we incubate rural enterprises and help them support services to grow their ventures and contribute to the local economy. I have been in the environmental space for over 4 years now, and particularly I'm interested in alternative economics, and doughnut economics is something that's very close to my heart and also close to my work, and hence I find quite a lot of interest in this area. Very happy to join this session today, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, and really great to have you and be part of this discussion today.
Yes, thank you, Indy, for inviting us to this panel. Thank you very much. Very glad to be with all of you here today. My name is Xavier. I am based in Salvador, in Brazil, and I am economist, and I've been in many different projects, a little bit too long to tell, around mainly Europe, Asia, and America in the last 25 years now. And now I am established in Salvador and developing different projects in the local community related to doughnut economics, trying to see and study the possible paths to eco-social transition. So very glad to discuss with you the subjects of today.
Thank you, Xavier. And I think, without, just confirming and also just reflecting, there's so much knowledge in this space right now as well, in terms of the different contexts and areas that all three of our panelists are coming from. and just wanted to acknowledge that. And that's why it's just been so great to bring you all three together in this space and in this discussion, because I think the different perspectives as well within the different areas and communities you're working in really adds that extra perspective as well. That's so important to hear about within the context of this work. So let me start with the first question. So this is around integrating local knowledge. So how is local knowledge and traditions being considered and incorporated into engagement approaches in terms of informing areas of gaps when it comes to community engagement? So this could look like anything when it comes to communication, to outreach, to even collaborative planning. How is those perspectives being considered? It's a big question, and I know we need so much time, but I thought we'd open up the space for this first question. And if it's okay, could I please hand over to Sujay to start the discussion?
Sure. Thanks, Cindy. And I think, yeah, it is a very big question, and also we'll have a big answer, but I'll try to sum it up to save time, right? So I think culture plays a very, very important role, culture and local traditions, in the work that we do, especially at the Jagriti Enterprise Center. And it's not like we integrate it into our work, but it actually informs our core strategy. I mean, one anecdote I can think of is this example from the epic Ramayana. So Ramayana is a very famous epic in the South and the Southeast Asia, as a few of you might know. And the story basically has this character called Jamwant. So Jamwant is the person who helps Hanuman, another important character in the Ramayana, to unlock his hidden potential that Hanuman had inside him, but never knew about it, right? So we think of ourselves as the Jamwant for the rural enterprises and the rural leaders that are emerging in the Purvanchal region. And we try to unlock that hidden potential inside of them, help them in understanding the kind of work that they can do, the potential that they have, and how they can serve the needs of the community better. So, the cultural interpretations of this have been there as a part of our strategy for a long time. And yeah, this was just one example. Another example I'd like to point out to is this 300-year-old banyan tree that sits right beside our enterprise center here in Purvanchal. And this tree also acts as a symbol for the network that we want to build. So the banyan tree is known for its aerial roots, right? The aerial roots that come out from the top and then go into the soil, and then it acts as a foundation for that banyan tree. So we see our work also to be inspired by the networks that these roots of the banyan tree creates, and we want to create that strong network of entrepreneurship across rural India. And we see that as a very big source of inspiration for us, and that's why we also called it the Banyan Revolution. So again, incorporating the local tradition and the local and also the natural asset of the region, right? So these were a few examples of how we incorporate them. And one last interesting example that I want to share is to do with the handicrafts and the art forms of the region. So a lot of the art forms of the region were inherently environmentally sustainable because they used biomaterials. And these biomaterials were not just something that you make art out of and hang in your bedroom, but they were actually utilities, right? They used to be used for day-to-day activities and also in traditions. So what we're trying to do is we're also reviving some of these lost traditions and cultures, and how we can then fit them to the current context. How can we bring them into the urban markets and then replace harmful stuff like plastic through these bio-based materials? So yeah, these are some examples of how we try to integrate the culture into our work. Thanks.
Thank you. And the idea of the banyan trees is beautiful, just thinking about it, and this, the symbolism of it as well within this work. So thank you. Eva, do you want to share next?
Yes, I'm happy to go next also because it links to this idea of the banyan tree. And I think that was the main reflection that I had from this question, that it's not integrating knowledge to something else, but it's really from the inside, from the inside, understanding what's your community best, because each of us doesn't know all the community as such. So instead of integrating it to something that is outside, that we sometimes see it like there is another idea and we want to integrate the knowledge into our idea, it's more how we are part of the community, where one one individual or one organization as part of the community. So what are the characteristics and values and people and networks around us that are already having similar values? So understanding who they are, what they're doing, and then which is our added value for that community. And in that, in particular, the examples of what Tricolor Coalition is doing, what we've seen is to being a facilitator, an intermediator, because sometimes there are different people in our community that may have similar values, but that they don't necessarily connect to each other because of space, because of time. So 3 things that we do that were also some similarities between what Sujay was saying. So that was also quite nice to hear. There are 3 actions that we do. One is to connect. The second one is to communicate. And the third one is to construct. What do we mean by that? To connect is really to understand who are the different players that have the same values, and create activities such as the Global Doughnut Day, in which they can meet each other and they can strengthen those relationships that sometimes they wouldn't have the time for. Then to communicate is, we could communicate because it starts with co, but in fact it's to exchange information. How can we facilitate that they can exchange knowledge, experience, capacities, resources, in order to feed each other, so that they can either on their own or in a collaborated way work together. And the final one is to construct, which is us serving as intermediaries for there to be something new. So one example is Gota Gota, that has been a very beautiful process that we have been working upon, where there have been public, private, social, and academic participants that in different workshops, we have heard about their opinions of what were the sustainability priorities in Mexico City. And so we first found some problems, which resulted that water was a priority, but then we also find some solutions, which resulted that there were already technologies of rainwater harvesting available in Mexico City that we could build from, but at the same time that they were not yet integrated into schools. So in the end, we co-created with all these actors a new project of things, capacities, knowledge, and experience that they had. So we were just serving as an intermediary. So those are 3 ways in which we try to integrate this local knowledge, knowing what's our role, but the best thing, knowing our community and how can we best participate and strengthen it when we share values.
Thanks, Eva. And I think, and it's a big question to still explore, is how do you really create that space to acknowledge those local traditions and that knowledge, because there's so much there from generations as well. So, and that could be reflected in terms of how you communicate and even the language that's used as part of this work. So there's just so much, I think, to explore as part of that.
If I can add only something.
Yes, please do.
One of our ideas in order to do so is that we want to make a water repository of problems, solutions, and actors. So the idea is to serve as a place that people can include articles, papers, information on what are the problems, but also solutions already available from companies, policies that are already doing so, as well as which actors, because in that way, we do believe that if that information is there available, then it's easier for people to know whom to talk, whom to speak, and then really collaborate when needed.
No, thank you for sharing. Xavier.
Yes. So our region here, it's called Bahia. It's a huge state, so big as maybe France or a couple of European states. And there is it's very well known that Bahia has 90% population Afro-American, so has inherited very rich African culture and gastronomy, music. So we have a very alive society full of cultural activities. In many layers of society and many aspects of life. As I said, it can be music, it can be dance, it can be gastronomy, it can be languages. But on the other hand, we are very worried to see the extinction process that the cultural aspects are suffering. So we are very, let's say, sensible, while on one hand, the cultural expression is very active, is very present in the streets, in the cultural events, in the family acting, how the small communities are behaving every day in everyday life. At the same time, we are seeing an extinction process due to the economic pressures that society is suffering in the global south, and that we are, of course, not extend from, not an exception. And then we think that in order to preserve that we would need to do an active projects in order to preserve this culture. But this is very much related to the way that people are living. As you probably know, the isolation of a large parts of society is increasing because the inequality gaps are increasing. This is, let's say, reducing the voice that these populations, huge populations of people in the suburbs are having in order to express themselves. And they have, while their own lives in their own streets are alive, they don't have enough means of directing their voices and their culture become relevant and present. So this divisive society, it's very worrying, because we don't see signs that this is improving or is going to improve with the complexity of our world, both in the environmental risks that we have that are increasing, and at the same time, the economic evolution that is not really showing, let's say, paths of proper solution. So what we try to do, only, let's put it this way, only the rich culture of the population that is very centuries ago, old of many centuries, and very rich traditions from religion to medicine music, as I said before, the only way that the only, let's say, sectors of this population that are a little bit protected are the ones who succeed some support from political or economical sectors, national or international. And that at the same time, it can be an assistance, but it can be dangerous too. So what we are trying to do here is to try to map the city and see how this culture is really established, in which patterns, and try to discover the most, let's say, valuable and fragile communities that don't have support, which are many of them. So that's an approach that we are trying to think, because in other ways, in other words, saying let's do an inventory of what we have, and then trying to understand their difficulties and their gaps and their isolation. And from that, we are willing to build some tools to try to implement local solutions in order that the most cultural parts of society that are preserved, or at least they are maintained in a rich way. So in order to face this extinction problem, we need first to, we think we need to develop a much further study of the whole diversity that we have, and then trying to build bridges between the engaged people.
Thank you. And there's so much in everything that you've shared. I think it's also acknowledging culture is one thing, but there's so many other things that need to be taken into consideration when it comes to engagement approaches that you've just highlighted. I think in terms of the inequalities, they are deep and they are complex, and there are so many things that need to be considered in terms of how do you also, really, meaningfully engage those who maybe, for example, economic, within that, their economic situation might not be able to take part within this conversation, let alone the work. And so, and that's just one aspect and one strand, which is on its own a lot, to give the space to really understand the impact it's having, and then really understanding how culture is connected to that as well in terms of playing a role. So I think there's so much that could be explored. Sujay, did you want to add?
Yeah, indeed, and thanks, Xavier. I think I had a lot of reflections on the things you just said, and especially on the part of inequalities, right? Even we've observed a lot of this happening in India. So we do a lot of work with farmers, with farming communities in the region, and we're trying to document what were the traditional farming practices, what was the food system of the region, and how that is constantly being extinct, in the words of Xavier. So what we also found is that now there is a revived movement of going back to the traditional food systems. So for example, there's this whole movement on millets and going back to millets, eating millets, because they would solve the food security problem, and they would also enhance the income of the farmers, and all of that, right? But what we see on the ground is that the farmers that we work with are so marginal that they first of all can't, I mean, they have very small land sizes, and they just can't experiment with something like going back to traditional practices, even though the government or the policies would want them to go back. They don't have the support system, they don't have the political or the economical support systems to really experiment with some of these things, right? And even the ones that do experiment with some of these ideas, they are serving for this elite class of people residing far away from their villages. So say someone is has started going natural and organic farming, and they have produced a bag of rice that is fully organic. The farmer himself does not consume that rice, so that rice is being sold off to some elite class community that is sitting far away in some other city, right? So how do we then bridge these gaps? We want to integrate the local culture back into the work we're doing, but there's also these inequalities that exist, right? And they need to be called out. And thanks for that reflection, Xavier.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can add, we have a worldwide, we have a huge problem because now, just put an example, we are talking very often about extinction of biodiversity, and therefore we talk that animals and fishes and marine fauna and plants are extinguishing. And I think that we don't talk enough about the huge problem of language extinction. We have a terrible problem in the world of language extinction. And with the language, a lot of knowledge is disappearing because language is related to crafts, is related to technique, related to science. The first ancestral people many centuries ago, thousands of years ago, they started to develop words in order to define and remember the properties of a plant or an animal. And that's how words started, in order to identify the qualities that children in the primitive peoples, they remembered the properties and the names of more than small children, 50 trees, 50 plants, or 60 animals. And they knew by heart not only the names, but all their properties and how they lived and how they moved. So knowledge and science and technique is related to words and to language in humankind. So I cannot stress more that the language extinction is really a tragedy, and I think we need to act.
Thank you, Xavier, and completely understand and echo exactly in terms of that language part, and that's why it's been so important. Even within the work of Deal itself, there's just so much more to explore. Before we move on to the next question, Eva, did you want to share?
Yes, I wanted to share also on the reflections of how, yes, inequalities are worldwide, and I think the challenge there is that it's structural as part of our systems or countries. And the question is how to address them, no? When you want to engage others, because when we speak about abstractly about inequalities, it's very big. But then when you sit different types of people in a table, then how do you make them talk? No, like that's like the concrete way of how to do so, because there are power differences, because there is lack of trust. So I think also regarding the question of how do you integrate knowledge, you have to be able to make a platform where these different types of stakeholders that are relevant, and also who decides what is relevant, of course, are there sitting, and each of them are valued, no? Because I think also the reasons why would be very beautiful concept that Javier was telling us about is because we don't value the previous things, because sometimes we value more the new things because they're innovative. Well, sometimes lots of or learnings or knowledge in fact comes from before. It just doesn't have like this science tag in. But for example, in Mexico, there was this medicine that they created out of a drink that they had in certain part of Mexico, and then they realized that in fact it was very good for the stomach, and then they made a medicine out of it, no? But like in order to really acknowledge and value this, I think that's something that we have to do also to integrate knowledge and traditions. And the only other comment that I was thinking when we were all talking was that it's interesting that we all believe that we have to map either which are the sectors that are more important, or which are the people that are more vulnerable, or which are the stakeholders that are more that we have to engage with, or which are the activities that they're already doing, you know? So I think in order to integrate local knowledge is also the visibility to know what is there in order to then be able to value it depending on what you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing. I think one of the biggest things that stood out for me was the quick reflection on power and who decides and that decision making. I think there's lots to explore as well within the power dynamics within this work and what that looks like. So related to just looking at another area is around then understanding, and I think we've all started talking about it in terms of the cultural impact. So how should the cultural context in the global majority world influence specifically the design and implementation of support systems, resources, spaces for local organizers within the context of this work in particular? That deal is also exploring as well with local organizers. Yeah, would like to start.
Well, this is, if I may,
Yes.
I think this is a very important question because in the global north, I think that they do not understand what happens in the close-up at all, in really the heart of societies. We are in an emergency situation. So any kind of design of resources to develop alternative economies, to develop, preserve culture, develop life, strengthen communities, give back a hope to neighborhoods. The only way to design tools that are appropriate, they have to be related with disasters, unfortunately. We need to include a disaster mode. I'm thinking a little bit like in the COVID period. COVID period, the whole world was in a disaster. So everybody in their own lives, they realized and they act like in a disaster. Solidarity, help, assistance, emergency, very quick sense of urgency of taking measures, accelerated implementation of processes, parallel organizations with technology or without technology to enhance the contact in order to develop activities because the normal system did not work. So actually we are in a similar situation. We are in a disaster mode the economy is not going to go better. And the environmental is drying so much or flooding so much every time that we see it in our streets. It's not anymore. It's like the COVID. It's not anymore. Some people, they got a virus, and in that neighbor, in that city, they have a little bit of a health problem. No, when the COVID started, you had it next door. And then you saw the ambulances running around, and you entered in panic because you saw so many ambulances carrying people away, and then you heard that the hospitals were full. So we are in a similar situation. We see neighborhoods that are every year are poorer, and every year are more in the hands of narco traffic. And every year, children in the suburbs, they have less education, and they become more ignorant, and then they're powerless, because the more ignorant they are, the more power. And that when they try to meet each other, they are controlled by militia from the factions of narco business. And that interrupts many of the spontaneous association initiatives of positive and good-willing citizens. Schools are with flooding because no installations are broken, and so forth. Youth cannot find jobs. And in the environmental environmental side, you also see it every day, like we see it all over. Increased temperatures and so forth. Drying parts of the cities are drying as well because of the weather, months without raining, for instance, and then suddenly flood. So I think that tools in the Global South need to face that we are heading into an emergency mode. And that if we do not prepare tools that are able to do a quick defense and assistance to in many senses to the communities, then it's going to be let's say inefficient, because every year we don't see things getting better. We have a hope, we have energy, we have visions of a better world. Of course, we have a lot of hope, energy, will, passion, but the environment is getting every time more complicated and more difficult. So we need to realize that we cannot play smooth. We need to develop tools in a way that can tackle big dramas and big catastrophic situations. And so we need to develop a new language, technical language I'm talking about, in designing these tools, in designing tools. I think that we need to talk a lot, discuss a lot, for instance, between the Doughnut communities in the Global South, to have more discussions about what's happening in our cities, and to invent from Philippines, India, African countries, and South American countries to do a kind of network within the Doughnut community to discuss how to develop new tools that adapt to these emergency situations. If we look the path of the last 15 years, it's catastrophic.
Yeah,
in the Global South. Besides a couple of the exceptions, of course, there are always exceptions involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that this dialogue among several communities in the Global South would be very, very exciting.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think within what you've said, there is the recognition, when just bringing it back to also this work and the work that Jill's doing, is the complexity in terms of the questions and the issues and the topics and areas that we're exploring as part of this work. It's huge, and there is an emergency in certain aspects in terms of addressing some of the things that are coming out every day, really, for so many people and communities within the global majority world. Okay, Eva, did you want to share, add?
Yes, I think I wanted to say that I'm very happy that Javier is saying that, no, because precisely with Brazil, we have started to have this conversation, regional conversation, of how can we collaborate, thinking that what is culture, no? Culture is a way in which they are learnings about a social group, no? So culture is how that history, those experiences, those crises in certain place, in certain geographies, have created certain knowledge of how to do things, no? Certain habits, how to respond to those. So in that way, if we see culture as not only as something that is lived today, but as a reason and a driver of how people are acting today, then in order to really work together with others in the global majority, then we also have to understand why, why they're acting that way. So yeah, so what I wanted to say was that the idea of what we think of how we can put, how should cultural context in the global majority influence? I think by understanding why is culture being expressed in certain ways. So if we have certain flexibility, for example, in Latin America, why is that? Because we have been able to see that if we try different things, then we can solve different problems, because we have different geographies, we have different cultures, we have a lot of diversity. So for us, openness and flexibility, for example, is important. You know? So in that way, there are certain commonalities of social groups that we can build upon and that can connect us to others, and that would be nice to further explore. In which way, in Latin America, there are certain commonalities of how we can adapt, create new narratives that build on the concepts that we already have, such as buen vivir, such as tequio, that already align certain values that also the Doughnut economics have, but also that have been created in our own geographies. In order to not say culture is something different, but to really say it's part of.
Thank you so much. Sujay, do you want to add?
Yes, very important points by both Xavier and Eva. And just to add to what Eva was saying just a few seconds ago, I think the tools and resources that the deal community has been preparing, or even the wider ecological and social community that works in these areas has been making, there is an increased sense of acknowledgement to indigenous cultures and traditions, but I feel there is a lack of engagement with these concepts, right? So I think we need to go beyond just acknowledging them, but to use the power of the community, use the power of the rising number of members that are joining this movement, and try to engage with some of these ideas. And there are already a lot of similar movements that have alignments with the Doughnut economics framework, the work that Deal has been doing. And then, it's important for us to find the commonalities between these movements, and then further increase the pace at which the work needs to be done, right? again pointed to what Xavier was saying. So the urgency of it will only come when these tools and resources will be relatable by the people in the global majority, and that will be relatable when you will engage with the already existing frameworks, knowledge, thinkers in the global majority who have been talking about these things for a while and doing some work, right? So I think that will also go a long way in further increasing the pace of the work we need to do.
Thank you. And I think you've all, also started talking about and highlighting also what those current gaps are within what needs to be more of in terms of the work and that deal with us, but also going beyond that as well, thinking about the future and sustainability of this work. Was, I think, even having this space today is just the start of a discussion, a conversation. But what does it look like to continue this discussion, to continue this work in that sense, not over just the year, but over the next few years? Eva, did you want to share, add?
Yes, in fact, it was also related to time, what I wanted to say as a comment, which is that culture is today, but it also comes from past needs. There is a reason why culture is there, but it also shows us future desires. So I think it's understanding the reason why there is certain culture in a place can allow us also to see in which way like the changes to the future succeed and what is needed for that.
Absolutely. And I think just in everything that's been also shared and said, there's a lot of space that should also be provided to be able to do this work well, and with local organizers in that context in terms of that knowledge. I think in terms of looking to the future as well, and what does next steps look like? How do we take this work forward? And so that's my last reflection or question, just putting it out there, is how, what does hope look like? Is there hope? What, how do we take this work forward and continue this? Does anybody want to share?
I can start. I think we were all trying to wait for each other. I think from what we've been seeing of gaps or needs that are still needed to be addressed are something that we have been speaking about, knowledge and information of what are the networks, who are the people that are aligned in the principles, perhaps, of Doughnut economics, which different organizations are already working with this in other regions in the world. And in that way, it could help us all either to connect to someone in a region, but also in other regions, and strengthen those connections. The other thing that I see is also these more interaction opportunities, because if there are these, if we start to see these networks of people in different places, we can also see some topics that may be relevant, such as, for example, Deal has done that now has education, city, business. Maybe there will be other topics, maybe water, maybe arts, maybe there can be other topics where there could be events that are related to that start to also connect more people. And finally, I also see that the gap of financial structures and social structures that can support the work that is being done. I know that in sustainability, for example, there is not a complete financial system that really gives money so that social and environmental projects are sustainable. So generally, they depend on public money or on crowdfunding. So allowing there to show that there is economic value in social and environmental value, I think that's something very important, not only to work with enterprises, but also banks and other types of structure that are also in the financial system, so that they get together also with the social and the social and environmental projects that are being done. And also social infrastructures, creating more time for people that we are all now on screens. You know, how can we have spaces where we can talk to each other to build more connections in order to build other things. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva. Sujay or Xavier, does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add again to what Eva was saying, I think a lot of the time, so very recently we did a workshop on donut economics for business, and we were speaking to the participants after the workshop, right? And then there was this a little bit of the feedback was that, so what, you know, what do I do about it? How does this help me improve my business? So linking to what Eva was saying about, you know, I think the resources or tools that we have right now from Deal are still not yet adequate to answer that why not, so what question, and why is this important for me, right? And especially on the aspect of how this can help, say, a nano-sized business of, you know, 2 or 3 women who are working together to create some handicraft products out of certain items, right? So when I'm talking to such kind of an individual, how do I then relate uh, the concept of donut economics or you know, social environmental transformation to a business of that scale, right? How do I translate some of these ideas to them? So I think there's a lot of challenges that we face in communicating uh, these issues to such communities. And yeah, so what can be done about it? So what role does business have to play, for example, in doing the transformations that we need? So we do have answers for the large businesses, but I think we need some more specific uh, intervention points that we can suggest to very small businesses in rural India, for example. And how does that relate to their supply chain? How does that relate to their profit making? How does that then relate to the livelihood aspect of theirs, because it's a very, very small business, right? So these are some things I think we can work towards, and there's definitely hope to answer your question on if there is any hope. And I think again culture will can play a very, very important role in that aspect as well. And just how Eva was pointing, that culture is not something that is in the past, right? It is something we live every day, and it is also dynamic. So we have to be able to use culture as a lens to then look at the future, to see what kind of changes are going to be coming up, how we can be prepared for those changes, and then use culture as a tool to you know, do some work in the future, right? So we need to also foresee some of the things or events that would happen using the lens of culture.
Thanks, Sujay. And Xavier, do you want to share?
Yes, very quickly then, to finish this third part. I think that current resource and support systems, I would mention 3 fields of action that I see necessary or that can help to advance. One is this, well, as I said before, this strategic positioning in defense. I think we need to defend culture. We need to save culture, save language, save knowledge and ancestral knowledge. And we need to have a sense of emergency, on strategic sense of emergency, in order that directs our projects to save culture and save local people's knowledge. The second, obviously, we did not talk today so very much, and I think it's fundamental, is educational tools, because educational tools are in starting with, for instance, the new tool that has come up in the Doughnut economic side, on the deal side. It is very full of hope, because we want to think how we can adapt it to the local communities here, because starting with the youth, it can be very fertile to disseminate a new way of mindset and behavior among the young people. I think it can be very productive. And the third, of course, is, as was mentioned also by Eva a little bit, is we need to develop skills and structures of how to find funding for all our projects here, because we, of course, do not have any financial assistance from or local governments or foundations or any other companies. So that I think it would be very helpful to do a workshop on how to develop funding in the global majority countries for our Doughnut economy projects.
Thank you. And there is absolutely, and I think just on a wider note, with the work that Deal's doing in education, there is so much, I'm sure, that's being explored. But you're absolutely right. Without that education part, you know, that could have a huge impact. And also, you know, really acknowledge the point about the funding as well. You know, you can't speak about this work without talking about the sustainability aspect of it and the financial aspect of it as well in order to do this work. So absolutely, and hopefully those spaces can be created to be able to talk about it and see what that looks like. So I think that's the end of the panel event. Thank you so much for joining us and just giving your time.
Thank you very much, too.
Thank you.
For organizing.
No worries.